you know, that context of why now? We all know about this conversation about trying to see boards more inclusive. I describe it as, you know, I want to see boards more representative of the communities and staff they serve. We're all very aware of that, and we're aware that there's a lot of work happening. But my question is, and this is why we titled today's session, is what more can we do to turn the dial now? And I know it's strange for me to say, let's have a conversation, if actually what some people are saying is, oh, we've had too many conversations, what about the action? The reason why I wanted to bring the roundtable about, there are a few reasons, and I deliberately didn't say this at the beginning. I wanted you and Paul to present that context first, is because we heard a few things there. The Midlands are faring slightly better. I know, and I didn't know before I started embarking on this, that the Midlands are doing, there's some fantastic work going on in the region. And I do hope that colleagues on the call today will share links to some of what you're doing. I know some of the reasons why people are joining in today is to hear best practice and to understand what some people are doing to really turn this dial and move it forward. But this is a call to action for all of us today. And I just want to, and I'll pose an action at the end, but I want to say, you know, if you think you're doing all you can at the moment in your role, within your confines, whatever it is, whether you are a system decision maker, whether you are a CEO, whether you are an EDI lead, whether you are, you know, in any job and you are from a minority background, if you feel you're doing all you can, then please share what you're doing, because especially if it's having impact. But if you know you could be doing more, then I hope what you'll hear today, and starting with that context of the data and starting with being really clear in your mind about strategic priorities, let's be brave today. That strap line of bravery in the boardroom is there for many reasons, but I'm really asking us all to be brave today. If you know you could be doing more, if you know there's something you could be doing and you haven't felt brave enough to do it, I hope what you'll hear today will encourage you to do that, or will give you some insights or ideas of what more you can do. I know there's a lot that we need others to do as well to help turn the dial, and I'm not denying that. But I think this is a call to action for all of us. And it's one of the reasons why I left my role, because I believe my purpose is to build a movement of brave leaders. I'm passionate about leadership, but I am very passionate about seeing people fulfill their potential and feel that they have equal opportunity, the same as others, regardless of their starting point. My starting point wasn't the best one, but I knew, I'm lucky, I've been blessed with a set of talents, and I navigated my way into the boardroom. And it's not good enough for me that I got there. I want to encourage and support everyone who could get there to get there. And one of the things that today has really driven me is I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a director from the Midlands region who I know, an aspiring director. They could be a director. And I know from that conversation, they were ready and they would hold their own in the boardroom. And they said, and I'm not going to name them, and they said to me, I'm not going to take a director job. I don't want to be in there on my own. I don't want to have to face all of that on my own. So when we're thinking about, we know there's talent out there. We know that there are some people who are in a state of readiness. But when we hear that people are frightened or don't want to be in that space, some of the conversation we're going to hear today, possibly from our panel guests, may shine a light on that as to why. And that just drives me even more. There is something about, yes, in some situations, people say they don't know where the talent is, or they say people are not ready yet. Well, I'll challenge some of that. But if we've got people who are ready, and as Paul just showed us, you know, the numbers have moved, but they haven't moved enough. We've got people who may not go in the boardroom because they don't feel brave enough to do that. There is something that we can do about that. So this is a big ticket item. We know that it's an emotional item. It's a difficult challenge to face. But I still honestly believe there is more that we can all do to start turning the dial now. Okay, so I'm going to get off my soapbox now for a moment, and I'm going to ask the panel guests to join me. So if I could invite you, my panel guests, to turn your cameras on and to put your mics on. And if I can welcome you. Good afternoon. And can I ask you to introduce yourselves? If I go around the screen and ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we will launch into the questions. So should I start with Bal? Good afternoon, Bal.
Good afternoon, Monique, and good afternoon, everybody on the call. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Bal Claire. I'm a non-exec director at the Coventry Warwickshire Partnership Trust. I'm also an equivalent of a non-exec director, an independent member of council at the University of Warwick, and I run my own consultancy business, MyConsult.
Thank you, Bal, and you're most welcome. Taps, can I come to you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Monique, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Taps Mtemachani. I'm Director of Transformation and Partnership for the CCG across Black Country and West Birmingham. I'm also the SRO for Health Inequalities across the ICS.
Thank you. And Ananta, hello, how are you?
Hi, Monique. Good afternoon, everyone. Really delighted to be a part of this event, and thank you for asking me. I'm Ananta Dave, and I'm the Executive Medical Director at Lincolnshire Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. I'm a psychiatrist by background.
Thank you. You're most welcome. And good afternoon, Patrick.
Good afternoon. Hopefully you can feel the warmth from the jacaranda trees. Afternoon. I'm Patrick Nyarumbu. I'm Executive Director of Strategy, People and Partnerships from Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust. I'm a mental health nurse by background, and pleased to be here and look forward to the session.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let's jump into it. I've got a few questions for all of you, and then I've got some questions that I will direct to individuals on the panel. Is that okay? Okay, and you know I've given you a little bit of guidance about how long your answers can be, so please be nice to me and help me to keep to time. All right, so first question, and this question's to everyone, but I'll work my way round. So Bal, can I start with you? Can you just summarize your journey for me into the boardroom and just tell us a little bit about what helped you to get there?
Yeah, so I started at BT, my background is telecom, so I started at BT as a technician apprentice. And I had zero ambition to become a director, an MD, or a board member, or whatever that ambition looked like. I had zero ambition at the time when I first started. I guess I was lucky enough to have the right coaches or mentors around me that saw something in me and helped motivate me to actually progress my career and what turned out to be quite a very successful career is as a senior director at BT. And if somebody asked me that when I first started, that I'd become a member of the senior leadership team at the blue chip FTSE 100, I'd think they'd be smoking something dodgy. But yeah, no, and I think a lot of that was to do with the guidance and people helping me, getting the right motivation and direction. BT also encouraged some of their senior directors to take on non-exec roles. So whilst I was at BT, I took on my first non-exec director role at University Hospitals Coventry and Warwickshire. And it was a two-way thing. So it wasn't something, somebody from the private sector coming into a public sector role to sort of contribute their knowledge or impart their knowledge or skills. But I learned an awful lot going into the public sector, just in terms of how it worked and how it operated, and that helped me bring a lot back into my role at BT. So that was really sort of my sort of very, very potted history in terms of journey into senior leadership at BT, which then gave me the opportunity to do non-exec work outside of the organisation.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm glad, I'm really pleased that Sam suggested you to join the panel, because it gives us a bit of different insight, doesn't it, about that private sector and then coming into the non-exec space. So thank you for that. So Taps, same question to you. If you could summarize your journey into the boardroom and what helped you get there.
I think the 3 minutes was about me, Monique. You know me well enough that I can carry on.
I'll give you a little finger, right, like that.
Just give me a little finger. Just give me a little finger. Thanks for the opportunity to share, actually, Monique. So the journey for me has not been linear. So there's no linear path to executive management. It's a sum of many different experiences, and sometimes difficult experiences as well. But it's not linear, definitely not. For me, there are kind of 7 principles that have continued to drive me. I won't go through all of the 7 principles, but 3 really stick out. The first one was around accountability The second one was around humility, and the third one was around popability. So the accountability one is exactly what Bal said. It's about ensuring that you've got the right support around you that can check and challenge you appropriately and help to develop you and support you into these kind of aspirational kind of roles. So accountability was the first one for me, and that's in the form of mentorship. And so I've had mentors all along the way. There's some really good, fantastic people that challenged me all along the way, that have helped me to think outside of me into what could be actually. And when I say outside of me, you know, there's certain fears and anxieties that can sometimes limit you in terms of your perspective. And so these mentors were really helpful in terms of helping me to look beyond the parapet into what could be, you know. So that I would say was really important. The second one around humility was really about a recognition that I had very little to lecture and a lot to learn, actually, you know. And I think it's really important to recognize that life is a learning experience. We've always got an opportunity to learn. If you want to grow, then you've got to learn. So I've learned a lot. You know, I did my MBA. I self-funded my MBA. When I was doing it, I was still working as a nurse. When I started my MBA, I trained as a nurse in Staffordshire. And then once I completed my MBA, I went on to do my master's in healthcare leadership. That was through the Leadership Academy. So humility and aptitude for kind of learning is really, really important. And then the third one was around popability, which is actually about having a teachable spirit, having a teachable kind of demeanor and a teachable approach to kind of life, really. So for me, it's about developing that agility to learn and then to adopt and then to adapt. So be prepared to change, you know, to be challenged and to change. And I would say that those are the kind of key things really that helped me in my journey towards kind of executive management. Now, the thing is, I'm still on that journey. Mm-hmm. I'm still on that journey of perfecting where I am and honing my skills and myself to be much more effective in what I do. And those 3 out of 7 principles still undergird me now. I'm quite happy to share the 7 principles if people want to see them, but you know, I can drop them in the chat. But
I was going to say that, yeah. I know, I bet you any money it will come up as a question, so please do when you can take a moment to drop that in the chat. But I could already see comments coming through with people resonating and people appreciating your honesty, Tap, so thank you. And Ananta, shall I come to you now and ask you that question?
Well, when I'm a first generation immigrant to the country. I'm now a proud British citizen. But when I first came to the country, I think, you know, it was, you know, very, very far away in terms of thinking about senior leadership. And I would say very honestly, for the first 15 years of my, you know, stay in this country, I would say I was mainly concerned with survival and moving on to the next stage, because I came here as a qualified psychiatrist, but having to do my training once again in order to pass the exams and get onto the specialist register, which allows you to become a consultant. So in terms of my clinical journey, it was just about ensuring that I got settled in, moved through the, you know, next phase of training, exams, on calls, and then, you know, balancing family and work, etc. So somewhere along the way, I think it was around when I became a consultant, when I became a new consultant, it was around 20 years ago that I became a consultant. Although I didn't take up any formal positions, I really became interested in how people made decisions. The fairness and the ethics of how we make decisions, not only about individual patients sat in front of us in our clinic rooms, but how do we actually design services for you know, people, communities, and populations, really started exercising me. So I think before I took up any formal management positions, I started getting involved in things like the ethics committee. I was involved in founding the clinical ethics committee in the trust where I was working, and then got involved in medical education and training. So I really felt the need to ensure that I play my part in developing the next generation of leaders. And I wanted to use what I had gone through. I suppose that set of intersectional challenges, you know, being an immigrant, person of color, and a woman, and trying to juggle family and work, I just found it extremely difficult and challenging. And I think I wanted to use that experience to see what it is that could help others. What is it that could help others in similar situations? And I didn't want people to feel defeated by these set of circumstances. I really felt that people in my situation had a lot to offer, because those experiences count for something, and they actually help you to make the right decisions and think about those who might be marginalized. So through those roles, I then got into medical management by applying for a clinical director post in my previous trust. And I worked in that role for around 6 years before applying for medical director posts. I think, so I wasn't successful when I applied locally in my own patch. And then, but the very strong support from mentors and sponsors who kept encouraging me, saying, and I think that's the message I would like to get across as well, that it doesn't mean that people who progress to senior positions have done it smoothly. There are barriers along the way, there are stumbles, things don't go according to plan. But if you believe strongly in something, put yourself forward, throw your hat into the ring. And even if you're not successful, that becomes a huge learning experience. So that's what I did. And the more as I was preparing for my medical director interviews, for example, I realized how few women of color I knew who were occupying that space. And I found it very hard to look to role models who had the same experiences as me. So that made me all the more aware of the importance of not only diversity, but representation. Both of those matter. So that's what drives me, I think, never forgetting the experiences and the roots where you come from, so that you know how people feel. And using your own intersectional experience and constantly putting yourself forward and learning from when things don't go right, and being there. Even small things, small steps that you do can be a huge inspiration to others. And now when I'm approached by people who say, we think if we see you there, we think we can do it as well, and can you help us? That's music to my ears. So that's what I like to see, and that's how I got to this place.
Thank you. Some powerful, powerful statements, what you said there. I love what you said there. Small steps can be a big inspiration to others. Very, very true. Thank you, Ananta. And Patrick, I know a bit about your story already, but I'd love for everybody else to hear it as well, about your journey into the boardroom.
All right. Thanks, Monique. Really good to be here. And I think, unlike Bal, I'm NHS through and through. I joined the NHS 24 years ago, so really feel like part of the family. I trained as a mental health nurse in London, and I think when I trained, I didn't really think about what my career could look like. However, I think a few years into it, you start to think, I'm sure there's more to the NHS than what I'm doing now. And that was a really difficult time for me, breaking out of that, because I was seeing people who were either working as matrons, service managers and so forth, who had been doing those jobs for a very long time, had not progressed. And I could just see myself getting stuck in that cycle. I did have a few attempts of going for some of those roles and wasn't successful at all. And when I decided to choose a different path, really stepping into something very different. And at the time, I didn't think I was being brave at all. So let me just go into clinical governance, which is very different to what I was doing. And I recall being told by my then manager to say I was professionally naive to think that I could be in a leadership role. And that was quite heartbreaking. And I think very on in my career, I started my career as a teenager. So I didn't think that I was strong enough at that point to really take in what I was hearing, really, and realized that I had to be resilient quite early on in my career, really dusting myself off and try again. And I've had some really excellent support. And I think part of that, I recall being offered an opportunity, which was really just picking up a random email from the Leadership Academy saying, we've got some spare licenses to do a chief executive diagnostic. I think I was only a band 7 at the time, and I said, yes, I'll do it. And that that feedback was absolutely remarkable. And I really took it to heart, really thinking about what does personal development mean for myself? How do I develop myself? Really developing those skills and understanding the habits that I needed to develop to be a leader. And also part of the feedback that I got was around the power of networking. So when you look at my career, I've worked in a number of different core cities. I've worked in London, I've worked in Birmingham, I've worked in Liverpool, I've worked in Manchester. That's really supported me in developing a very strong network base. And also working in different in different services, working in acute trust, working in cardiothoracic, where people say, well, what's a mental health nurse doing in tertiary care?
Yeah.
But looking back now, that was really important experience that I gained from there, working in commissioning and in regulation. I've had some really good mentors as well. Really choosing good mentors, I think, is something that people need to really focus on. That personal development, that self-determination and sacrifice. I think it was Taps who was talking about that early on. And there's some roles that I've done that I must say, I didn't enjoy it. It was hard work, commuting, waking up in the morning, missing out on that school run, paying, an arm and a leg for your commute. But it was worth it because that was personal sacrifice for my own development. So I think there's something about not seeking the permission, but making sure that you can really focus on yourself. And I think there are different ways of defining what bravery look like. And I think it's really about defining that for yourself and saying, am I being brave enough today in terms of what I'm planning to do for my future? So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
No, thank you, Patrick. And I think you've all done half my job for me, because in what you shared about your journey, you've also shared about, it is a mic drop moment. That's true, Jazz. I think what you shared, though, is you've been very open as well about the challenges, about the resilience. I know it's a word we hear a lot, but actually about how you've had to be resilient on your journey. Taps, I just want to come to you, though, with a follow-up, just to say, because you spoke to us about what's governed you, if I use that language, and some of what you use to help aid your development and progress. Can I just ask you, because you did touch it, you said there's been challenges and knocks along the way. Would you mind sharing a little bit of what one of those challenges were for you on your journey into the boardroom?
Okay, yeah, I'm more than happy to respond to that. So, there are many vicissitudes when you're trying to tread this path. One of the key things for me was being able to communicate yourself in a way that colleagues can understand and appreciate. Now, this is beyond kind of speaking the English language. This is about the meaning behind the English language. It's almost having a sense of the local colloquial, if you like. There's meaning behind language, and it was getting into that, all of the cultural aspects and what people actually mean when they say certain things or do certain things. That for me was a steep learning curve. Having come into this country when I was actually 18 from Zimbabwe, I had immense kind of cultural shock. It was transplant shock that hit me about just the way of life, the way that people do things, communicate, the different relationships and how you navigate that, even in a professional context, was a real challenge for me. And I had to go on a really steep journey of understanding and learning and understanding those complexities, if you like. And I suppose for me, it became an issue of looking within myself and challenging myself to change. There were things about me that just wouldn't work within this context, because this is a completely different culture, completely different country. The transactional language, relational language is completely different. So you have to change the way you apply yourself. in order to fit in with how people understand or transact within the kind of NHS environment within England. So for me, it was a very steep journey of learning and understanding those differences, and then learning to apply myself. So communication was a big issue. And then aligned with that as well was the whole confidence aspect, because I think you draw confidence from your understanding and your knowledge. And then if you've got gaps in knowledge and understanding, certainly for someone like me, I'm knowledge driven. And so if you've got gaps in knowledge and understanding, then you're on shaky ground for me. And I really was on shaky ground. So there was something about bridging that gap of knowledge and understanding, whether that was academic knowledge, whether that was kind of general societal knowledge and understanding. I had to plug that gap with a lot of learning. That's why I said that you have to have that humility and that probability, that teachable spirit, in order to learn, to adopt and to adapt and change. So one of the final things, Monique, because I know I can go on for forever. One of the final things for me was about knowing myself, really truly knowing me. And there's a Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu. He's got these sayings attributed to him. Knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is wisdom. Mastering others is strength, but mastering yourself is true power. And honestly, for me, getting to master myself and to understand what I'm about, what I can do, how far I can go, how far I can stretch, all of that was really, really important for me, gaining power over myself and being able to communicate the confidence that is there within myself. And one other thing, Monique, final thing, I promise, confidence is something that you give yourself. It's not something that you can wait and stand along for other people to give it to you. It's something that you generate from within yourself. I truly, honestly believe that. You can get encouragement from other people and people can egg you along the way, but confidence is very much an intrinsic factor that comes from within ourselves. So I had to build that sense of confidence within myself through knowledge acquisition. So all of the courses that I did, all of the mentorship, all of the supervision that I got, all of that was helpful in me amassing that critical mass of confidence within myself, and then being able to communicate that confidence in a kind of a professional sort of environment. So those are the kind of vicissitudes, I would say, that I have faced over time, Monique.
Thank you, Taps. And I think there's some gems that you've put in there as well with regards to what you've explained, and not just making a statement of why something was important, but really breaking it down on your view and why and how you've used that. So thank you very much. I'm going to spin the question slightly now and come from the other side. So we've spoken about your journey getting into the boardroom and some of the challenges you faced. Bal, I'm going to come to you and ask you a question now. So you're in the boardroom now. You told us you've had a few non-exec director roles. Can I ask you, how are you using your power and influence as a board member now to help turn the dial?
Yeah, thanks, Monique. Right, so I think you touched on earlier on, you talked about, conversation versus action. And I think we have lots of conversations. However, my view is that sometimes we don't have the right conversations that actually drive action, if that makes sense. So there's lots of conversations in boardrooms that are what I would say implied. So people will talk about it, there'll be a chart go up. And I think that those conversations, to take them further, are often the ones that make people feel a little uncomfortable. And I think you've got to have that sort of moment of uncomfortableness to actually then spark some action. So I think from my perspective, the way I approach things is come at it from a very, very informed perspective in terms of my questioning, but in terms of driving those conversations, you've got to touch on those uncomfortable areas that will make people think, that will make people realize what is it in reality that actually needs to be done, and then you can turn that into true action. So I think it is about having those right conversations and making those conversations count. So that's the big thing. But you know, boardrooms, you know, as one of our colleagues said, can be lonely places if you're if you're a BME background. You could feel very alone or isolated, or feel very alone or isolated. And so I think the power of networks is very good as well. So I, you know, I'm a big advocate of networks. In particular, I'm a member of two from a non-exec perspective, two very influential networks. First is the CCOL group, which is a group of BME background non-exec directors across the UK. And the second is a network called Apna NHS. Apna means hour in Punjabi Hindi, in Indian. And that's made up of South Asian professionals from across the UK, and Ananta is one of the members. And I take a lot of learning and make a lot of, you know, my own personal insights and contributions, and some interesting debates that take place in those networks. And it's a very good forum to actually learn and take opinion from, and then bring that back into your specific day job in the boardroom. So those are the sort of those are the areas. But it really is about making those conversations count. And I think sometimes, you know, we oversimplify the issue, and that then allows people to overlook what really is the issue. And I think, you know, just be relentless, and, you know, just keep chipping away at it. You know, make people uncomfortable, have those honest conversations, and you can do that in a non-confrontational way. And once you do touch those conversations, you know, and everybody's then contributing, it's a very powerful thing in terms of how that then drives action.
Thank you, Bal. Thank you for explaining that. And Bal, drop into the chat. I know that Apna Network does have a large following already, but if there's any connections or links that you and Ananta can drop into the chat, please do so. So Patrick, I'm going to come to you, and Ananta, I'm going to come to you after. But Patrick, I just want to follow up and ask you that question as well. Ananta, I have a different question I want to ask you. But Patrick, I just want to ask you, how are you using your power and influence as a board member? As I said, when I introduced you, you're very well known. You do have a good network. But how are you using your power and influence in your boardroom to help shift the dial? Okay.
So I think for me, I never make any assumptions that the fact that I'm a Black man, an African man, then I understand the views of any ethnic minority out there. We all have different experiences. And I think it's a really good starting point for myself to really acknowledge that I might not be able to understand all the different challenges. I have my own experiences, and I think it's really about bringing that into the boardroom. There's something about being very authentic. And I was saying earlier on about defining what bravery looks like. And there's something about that environment that makes it very difficult, that you have to be really grounded in being very authentic and being able to speak up, but in a way that you feel that you're very comfortable to be able to say that. Because I've recently met people who are very senior who've said they've never actually said even their own ethnicity out loud. And that's how challenging it can be, that people find it very difficult to be themselves in that space. So I just wanted to highlight that first of all. I think just to give examples, really, I think Kuvi early on in the data that they were sharing, talking about population and demographics. We know, for example, in the patch that I cover, 41% of the population of Birmingham is from Black, Asian, or ethnic minority background. And yet when you look at the leadership and the demographics, is very different. And as an organization, that is something that we're really focusing on. We are making small steps but it's really about having those uncomfortable conversations, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, are we truly representing the population that we serve? And it's really asking those uncomfortable questions. And yeah, I think it's critical that we do that. And for me, there's also something about how do you pull people through? We've been talking about how lonely it is being there on your own in the boardroom. But I think for me, it's ensuring that you're doing what you can to pull people through. And I think that is really, really critical. I currently chair a national network of men from a nursing background. It's called the Jamali Men's Network. And that network is truly designed to do that. We really work with people who are aspiring to get into the boardroom and pulling each other up. And we've seen some really great results just by purely inspiring each other.
Yes.
Being able to see leaders that look like you is really critical.
Yes.
I didn't see anyone that looked like me as I was progressing in my career. And I hear people saying, it's inspiring enough just seeing you in the boardroom. We don't care what you do. We just want to see you there, and that's inspiring. And I'm thinking, wow. And so I think spaces like this, Monique, as much as we're talking about what happens in the boardroom, I think spaces like this are really, really critical for people to see that it's possible. You can do it if you really believe in yourself.
Yeah. Just so, I feel emotional with what you've said. Anyone who knows me knows I wear my heart on my sleeve, but I really feel emotional what you said, because it's what we all hear, isn't it? You can't be what you can't see. And it rings so true, isn't it? That it crushes some people's aspirations. And I know that's why you're all sharing about the resilience and about digging in and about challenging yourself and about pushing and going through that discomfort yourself. And it can sound almost strange to then go, and then when you get there, it's still challenging too. But it's exactly why we're talking about it today, because if we can rise up together, if we can create more brave leaders together, if we can increase those numbers, not only is it serving the community we serve better, and helping to address inequalities, it's also people won't be so isolated, because the NHS isn't going to change overnight, is it? As much as some steps are happening. And that's why I want to come to you, because I know in your board, you are the only executive director from a Black or Asian background. And that question I really want to pose to you, because I think I'd love to hear your insight into it. In what does that really feel like when you're operating at that level and you are the only one?
Yeah, I mean, like as others have said, it's not easy. It can feel lonely, very difficult. And also you can feel very vulnerable. I mean, there's, I suppose, a kind of a paradox in that, because people assume being a board member with a position of power, and we should never forget the privilege that comes with it, the accountability that's a part of it. But also when you're isolated, you're vulnerable. Partly because, I think it takes a while for you to realize that vulnerability can be strength and can actually be a way of humanizing the boardroom and making people see a different perspective. And that came home to me very starkly when, during the pandemic, during the various waves of the pandemic. And because we were trying to get board members and other senior leaders to understand what it was like for marginalized, discriminated against communities and people from a BAME background to experience the inequalities of the pandemic. It helped that, sometimes it was hard, because I've lost family members to the pandemic from India, from where I'm from. And it was hard trying to maintain that balance between grieving and allowing myself to be a family member and a friend and a colleague, and being able to do my work as a board member as well. But that very vulnerability can be used to, as I said, to change perspectives and make people realize that privilege is a thing, and how you use your privilege And combining that privilege with humility and understanding is so important. It's such a powerful weapon to have when you're trying to change things. I think you can't overstate the importance of the connections and the networks. You've got to find your own spaces where you can be yourself. I mean, for me, what I've learned is, whether it is through feeling the isolation and the loneliness, or through trying to represent diverse views, is if you're a leader, there has to be authenticity. You cannot pretend to be somebody else. So you've got to be yourself. And people have got to see the power of that fullness of your identity. And that's how they start realizing there are identities and stories different to theirs, different to the common narrative. So the authenticity is important, because that's what then connects to people and makes them think, yes, I can do that as well. I can offer a different perspective too. And I can feel brave enough to be myself. So that's important. The other thing is the accessibility. When you're in a boardroom, you realize that the work that goes on in the rest of the organization and that your team does for you, that's what helps you deliver in the boardroom. You're not doing it by yourself. There's a team around you. And if you develop that team, it helps you in two ways. A, it helps you to deliver on the things that you're accountable for and things move forward. B, you are developing talent, succession planning. You think, well, if you're not there tomorrow, who is going to pick up your mantle and continue the work? How will there be continuity? As a doctor, you're always thinking, how do I provide continuity of care to my patient? As a board member, as a leader, you should be thinking, how do I provide that continuity in leadership? So it helps in several ways if you're able to have that accessible approach where people think, well, I can approach Ananta, this boardroom is not some mysterious place. We need to demystify it. So that's about the accessibility bit of it. And the third is the accountability. As I said, being very, very clear about your privilege, about what you're responsible for, how you're going to achieve it, and being willing to listen to difficult and, horrible stories sometimes, because it's only by listening, gaining feedback, and getting a true sense of what it's like for people living everyday lives that you can try and make it different for them. So having that sense of accountability is really important. So you have to break down what is it that accountability means for you in the boardroom. And, being isolated doesn't make it easy. But what I have seen is, as Patrick was saying, by starting off on that journey, I have been able to encourage other people as well to take that leap or to think of getting into that space. So I am seeing more people stepping forward and wanting to reach those senior leadership positions. So that first step does make a difference, is what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Just so much there, I'm sure resonates with many. And just to tell you guys, if you're not looking at it, the chat is absolutely popping off. So, thank you so much. What you're sharing here is inspiring people. People are respecting your openness and honesty. We're having comments. We know we've got Chief Exec on the call today who's saying that this has given them insights and to think about what they can do differently going forward. So really, really appreciate what you're sharing. Now, we have 3 minutes left for our panel discussion. And I really wanted to ask you about, you touched on some of it, Ananta, in what you said, but I do want to come back round to Bal and to Taps, and just to ask this question before we take some questions from the audience is, what advice, Bal, I'll start with you, what advice would you give to any aspiring executive in the audience today? And I know we have many. I should have said, we've got over 150 people on the call today, so a lot of people listening, a lot of people who are aspiring execs who want to climb the ladder. What advice would you give them?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, please.
Right. So if I may just say, the boardroom everywhere, anything you do is about people. Very fundamentally, it's about people. It's the people you work with, the dynamics, their motivations, and their perspectives, trying to understand. And that, I think Ananta touched on it in terms of how we work together. It's making decisions that impact maybe sometimes, hundreds of thousands of people. And that decision-making process and the accountability and responsibility that goes with it is epic. It's about customers, patients in the NHS context, but it's about the people you impact by the decisions you make and the actions you take. And that then drives the whole thing forward. So it's all about people. So I just wanted to say that. But my advice would be, and I think lots of my colleagues have touched on this, is know what you're good at, and know what you're not so good at. Be very, very aware. Be very, very aware. And be aware of the people around you who've either got complementary skills to sort of support some of your areas of learning or areas that you need to build on or develop. And then the other thing is have a sponsor, somebody to shout your name in the right places. It's very different to a mentor, but have a sponsor. Make sure you've got the right people, the right person there who's actually promoting you as an individual in the right circles. And then, you've got to create your own opportunity. Got to be tenacious, keep at it, keep going. Just, don't give up. People will want you to give up, but don't, and it will happen. You keep doing good things will happen to you. That'd be my advice.
Thank you.
Just kind of building on that, Monique, if I may, very, very quickly, it doesn't matter how slow you may go, as long as you don't stop. That's what Confucius said. It's a Chinese philosopher. The three things for me is know yourself. That's number one. Grow yourself is number two. And the third one is, as Monique always says, back yourself. I 100%. Think those are the three kind of take-home messages I would like to emphasize. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ananta and Patrick, is there anything you want to add there in terms of, again, both of you in answering your questions, you were very specific about the advice you were giving people. So if there's anything you want to add, do say now.
Okay, yeah, I'll be quick. I think others have said that. I think you have to really believe in yourself, make a plan, develop yourself. And when I talk about developing yourself, this is not about degrees and PhDs. This is really about what difference do I want to see in myself going forward. It's really about those habits. Stay motivated to exceed your goals. I think that's really important. Networking, again, emphasizing that. And finally, just be kind to yourself.
That's a very important last point, isn't it? Because I think what we've been sharing here, as I said, makes things sound also challenging, but I think we're trying to give that insight, aren't we? It's that insight and encouragement that you may need to dig a little bit deeper, but I think that's an important point. And even more so with, like what you mentioned, Ananta, we've all lived through a pandemic for the last 2 years. Okay, I need to let us take some questions from the audience because I know we have some there. So Ruby, do you want to come on screen and join us and see if we can take some of these questions before we have to wrap up?
Well, before I even start on the questions, that was absolutely amazing. I had my camera off and my mute off, and I was literally talking to the screen as you guys were talking, going, oh my God, yes, Taps, yes, Patrick, absolutely. I was going for it. So that was really inspiring. But we've got a couple of questions. So the first question is from Saima, and it's, are we doing enough to increase the number of diverse people in decision-making positions and forums? What is working that we need to do more of? And that question is for any of the panel members.
If it's okay, I wouldn't mind taking that question actually, because I'm not being tricky, I'd almost play it back. I think it's the questions for us all to ask ourselves, isn't it? What more can we be doing? And Simon, thank you for that. I'd love for you to share as well. Simon's from West Yorkshire, and they've done a lot of work up there. And I think it's worth people seeing, if you're not aware of the work they've done, and this isn't a planted question, honestly, to take a look at it. But the thing, I suppose what I throw up here is we've just heard the panel talk to us about a lot about taking responsibility of self, isn't it? I've heard that a lot about, yes, there are challenges. Yes, there's oppression. Yes, we heard, Patrick mentioned that horrible situation he went through where the manager said, you're not ready for this and you're not going to be ready for it. But actually there's something about taking that responsibility of self, isn't there? So is there more that we can be doing? I believe, yes, there is. And it's one of the key questions that I'm asking everyone here to say, not just the panel, but everyone on the call as well. Whilst you're here to hear inspiration, I also want people to share what they think can be happening as more. What more can we be doing? Yes, people are saying this is a great session. I don't work for the NHS. You know, this was me and Sam from Woodrow Mercer saying that we feel that there's something we could do. We want to work with our NHS colleagues, and I'm working with Kuvi and Paul, but actually I don't work for the NHS. So is this the kind of forum that should be available and be available more regularly? But I also know I'll put the challenge out there, and who moves it forward from here? You know, whose responsibility is this? I think it's a good question. I don't know that there's a firm answer. And I don't know if any of the panel want to come in on that. Bal, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is no, there isn't enough diversity in senior roles. You just look at the boards; they're not representative of the communities they serve and the people they help make better. You know, from an NHS context, and I think it's everybody's responsibility. And it goes back to my point I was making about having those conversations. You've got to call it out. You know, you just can't continue having these sort of implied conversations. You've got to call it out when it happens, and make people uncomfortable. And I think you know, and I'm not saying that in a sort of a very divisive way. It's about really creating those honest conversations. And once you start to have those honest conversations, you can actually then drive the right change. So it's really getting down to those real honest conversations in my mind, and it's everybody's responsibility at any level of an organisation.
Thank you. Ruby, should we take another question?
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions that are all around the same theme, so I'm just going to try and combine them together. So you all spoke a lot about mentorship and support that you needed throughout that journey. So some of the questions are, do you have any tips on finding a mentor or a sponsor that is a correct fit for you? And the second part to that question is, what is allyship's role within that?
Okay, so should we take the first part first? The Taps, do you want to come in and answer that one about mentors? I don't know if you want Ruby to ask it again.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to take that. So the first thing is, and I know this is not what was asked, but I'll say it anyway. Mentors are not going to come and look for you. You have to go out and look for a mentor, you know, because I know that there's this idea around, you know, mentors are going to come and find me because I'm a special talent. Well, no, you're going to have to go out and find a mentor, actively find a mentor. But then it comes back to, where do you see yourself? What are your flaws and your deficiencies that you need to address? And then you find a mentor on that basis, someone who's going to challenge you enough to get some real traction, change traction within yourself in terms of that. So don't choose a mentor because they're comfortable to sit around the table with and have a good chat and have a cup of coffee and biscuits. You need to choose someone who will challenge you and who will really out those deficiencies that are there within you so that they can be addressed. You know, mentorship should be an uncomfortable experience, actually. You know, it should be something that kind of challenges you and keeps you activated, seeking after the change that you desire. So unless there's that challenge built into the process, I would argue that, are you getting anything out of that relationship? Because change must challenge us. Growth must challenge us. You know, so a mentor that challenges you is really, really important. But having said that, there's some people who are not interested in supporting you, so they make it really, really difficult, and they're actually saying it in the way that they behave. Well, you have to be able to discern that. But that also takes time, and also networking and understanding what people are about, what their, you know, kind of priorities are, where their heart is, I think is also important. So check with other people about other people, because invariably other people know a lot about other people if we just plug into them. Yeah.
Thank you. And then there was a second part to that question, wasn't there, Ruby?
The second part is how the role allyship has played in your journeys.
Okay, does anyone want to take that? Ananta, do you want to take that?
Can I come in? Yes. And just before I talk about allyship, I mean, about the mentorship points, I think different people go through different journeys, and sometimes informal mentors can be okay. And there is power in compassion and gentleness as well. But the important thing is, whether it is moving things forward for you and whether it is allowing you to be yourself, I think, and it's a trial and error method sometimes about mentorship. About allyship, I mean, for me, I have to say the reason that I have been able to progress is not only about having mentors and sponsors, as Bal said, but also about allies. I mean, a very typical example was when I was applying for executive positions. At that point, I did not know people from an ethnic minority, women from an ethnic minority background who were executive directors. I think I didn't even know non-executive directors were women at that point. I since I have come to know. So for me, I have been hugely supported by men as allies, men from all backgrounds, and I cannot state that enough. I found people, men who were unconditional, non-judgmental, very generous with their time and wisdom, and encouraging me, telling me not to get disappointed if it didn't work out, helping me articulate my strengths. I think the thing about allyship is not only the fact that you come from a position of privilege, but you're able to empathize with people who do not have your privilege, but who have the potential. The other thing also about allyship is the ability to be humble and generous. You've got to be incredibly generous and discerning, because what allies did, I think for me in my case, is helped me identify and articulate my strengths in a way which I wasn't prepared to do initially because I didn't have the confidence, but they really helped me build it up. So I think hugely important, the role that allies play and how we nurture them in our various networks, mentors, sponsors, allies, they all have a role. Sometimes they can be, one people playing different roles at different times, one person, but they're hugely important. And for me, I would not have been able to progress if I did not have men from all backgrounds as allies at every stage of my career.
Thank you, Ananta. I think that's a really helpful point what you made there, because I think we hear the terms mentors, sponsors, allies thrown in quite a lot to conversations, and I think you explaining how that's been of benefit to you and how the difference is. A lot of people ask about the difference. Ruby, I always do this, but it will be great for us to share when we do send out the follow-up, just giving those statements about the differences. And that's not insulting anyone's intelligence, but I think sometimes people use mentors and sponsors especially and coaching interchangeably, and having that clean language of what they mean. See, Sat, I know Sat's on the call, I remember clean language, but having that is helpful for people to understand, to try and understand what you may need at different times.
Can I just butt in for a quick second around the allyship aspect? Because I think with allyship, you really need to, it's the fruit that you need to watch for. When someone is being described as an ally, we want to see the fruit. You have to kind of follow through with action around the rhetoric of anti-racism and anti-prejudice and all that kind of stuff, because there's such a term as aversive racism. Now, aversive racism is when white colleagues who have an aversion to being called prejudiced or to being seen as prejudiced, and so they have a lot of rhetoric around kind of anti-racism, etc., and are very vocal around that. But actually, when the chips are down, their true colors come shining out, so when you're squeezed, what is in you actually comes out. So I think it's really important that, we delineate between allyship and aversive racism. And the way that you do that is by watching for the fruit and actually being really observant and understanding what that person is really about in their actions rather than in their rhetoric. Really important. And actually, we've got some really good allies in the Black country, so the chief exec of the CCG, I'll have to say now, Paul Morbach, fantastic ally. He was voted an ally in our recent kind of Black Lives Matter event. We've got Laura Broster. There's many people in the Black country system who are fantastic allies, but we still have to be careful, watch for the fruit and see whether they follow through the rhetoric with actual action.
And pick it, that is such a, that's an uncomfortable point for some people, but I think it's a very true point, because we know in the NHS, and it was something I wanted to say, that it's so easy. I could have put up a set of really slick slides today, talk to them, you know, say the right things, and we all feel, yeah, and nothing happens. You know, and it's so easy to fall into that trap. And I think you make a valid point, because that's what everyone's saying now. You know, I've seen in the chat people saying people have got really low self-esteem, people feel helpless, you know, that they've lost some of that hope. And I hope what we're talking about today actually galvanizes and re-energizes some people to either have hope or to feel that there are people out there they can connect with, you know, to try and rise up together. But you're so right. It's especially if you are feeling hopeless, you can easily be swayed by what someone's saying. And 6, 9, 12 months down the line, there's no action. So
brilliant.
If we can.
Okay, so we've got this next question. This again is to any of the panel members. How can accountability be developed more rapidly or bravely to manage inequalities? That's the first part of it. I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll go to the second part.
Would anybody like to volunteer to take that one? Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, I'll come in here. So I think the challenge that we have in my frustration is that sometimes people are waiting to be told what to do or to be told what that accountability looks like. I think being in the boardroom means being able to look at what are we doing ourselves to hold ourselves to account, and how do we build that into our governance, into the way we make decisions. We might not got it right now, but I think those are the kind of conversations we're starting to have, and making that very clear around what does accountability look like for us. Because I think waiting to say we're going to have some sort of framework nationally to do this. Yeah, how many times have we go around in different reports that we receive, and then we have another report and yet another report? I think the fact that we are in these organizations, how can we ensure we make a difference? We have people that look like us who've come before us. They've done what they can. It's our opportunity to turn that dial and pass on that baton. Hence why it's really great that we can pull people through to take that baton forward. So I think for me, accountability is really looking at what am I doing today, and how do we ensure that we hold each other to account within the space that you have in your sphere of influence, because otherwise we'll be waiting. Earlier on, Kuvi was talking about 19% that Simon Stevens said we need to achieve. You know, we could easily just say, yeah, we've achieved 19%. And start to turn the dashboard green. But does that truly reflect the experience of our staff? No, it doesn't. So I think it's really important that when we talk about accountability, we're really clear about what does that actually mean to our staff and the service users that we serve.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. You've kind of answered the next part of it anyways, Patrick, because the next bit of that question was, is there a need for a regional accountability framework to be developed? So you've kind of, in what you just said, pretty much answered that. Yes, there is, but actually we shouldn't wait for that. We need to start thinking about what accountability means for us. So next question, what is the one thing that you have done that has made the biggest difference for you? And again, to any panel member.
I think that would be a good question. If you promise me all that you can answer in less than 1 minute, I'd like to ask it to all of you, actually. So shall we start with Ananta?
Very briefly, I think it's about role modeling inclusive, compassionate behaviors.
Thank you. And Bal?
Sorry for a generic answer. Taking risks. And being allowed to take risks and making mistakes. I think there's a culture, and I'll say it within the NHS, there's a fear to actually make a mistake. Maybe because it's public purse, but there's equal accountability in the private sector when you're spending shareholder money. So it's making calculated decisions, taking risks, and making mistakes. People will make mistakes and learn, but then make sure you learn from them. Get up and learn. So that it's being allowed, having been allowed to do that. Because I think in any other environment, I'll probably been shouted down or fired or something. That culture does seem to exist within the NHS, and it's that removing those fears, I think.
Thank you. And Taps, do you want to answer that as well?
Yeah, for me, it's just two things: my faith in God and determination, and just that, really, faith and determination just keep spurring me on, and I'm still going.
Thank you. And Patrick?
So for me, I think was realizing early on in my career that nothing actually grows in the comfort zone, and I've not been, and being able to take action whenever I start to feel comfortable, I start to get uncomfortable.
For sure, for sure, for sure. I mean, so today has exceeded my expectations by far, in terms of what we've spoken about, what we've covered, the honesty of the chat, and some of the challenges in the chat, and also whether you guys are looking at the chat or not, some of the comments that you've said have kind of challenged some of the thinking in the chat, I hope, as well. And Ruby, do come back on screen, because I did want to ask you as well if there's anything that you wanted to add. But usually now what I have to do is summarize what I've heard and what my thoughts are. But before I do that, Ruby, and I don't even know if I introduced you. So for those of you who've been on webinars with me before, you know Ruby is my absolute right-hand lady, trusted advisor. She's also works with me very closely and is a fantastic lead EDI consultant and OD expert. But she also supports me in designing and co-creating some of the things that we're doing, including today. So Ruby, I do want to say thank you as always, but also, you know, do you have any comments that you wanted to add before I wrap up?
No, I think it was just really inspiring. I think to just hear the different experiences and the different views of the panelists today, and actually just the energy in the chat function. It's got people really thought-provoking things, and I know it sometimes feels like, well, we've done these before, but actually it generates something. It generates a different type of thinking. I could relate to quite a lot of the stuff that most of you have said. In particular, Patrick, when you were talking about, you know, people's expectations of you as a Black man, that actually your story and what you've gone through, they make an assumption that you can speak for everyone that looks like you. So I thought it was really inspirational, actually, and some nuggets for me to think about my own journey and moving forward. So thank you. That's all I'd add. And thank you, Monique, for this opportunity.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Ruby. So let me try and sum up some of the key themes that I heard in the conversation today. I heard accountability loud and clear, and I heard that for everybody, whatever role you are in. This isn't, I saw in the chat, this isn't only talking, yes, our focus has been on the boardroom, and the reason why I focused on the boardroom is because I know that we know boardrooms have power. So if we can change the dynamic in the boardroom, I believe that will have a ripple effect. I'm also really concerned that because we do have the Simon Stevens target, we will see a shift in the numbers, but we're going to see people going into boardrooms where some of what colleagues have shared today, they'll be experienced in those environments. And if you don't have the self-belief, or as Tap said it, you know yourself, grow yourself, back yourself. If you haven't been through that, if, as Patrick said, you're not comfortable with being uncomfortable in your journey, it will be a revolving door. One, because you won't have the resilience, but two, you will feel oppression at times. You will feel isolated. You will feel vulnerable. You heard many of those words today. So my passion, if you like, and where my focus is number one, let's get more aspiring execs in a state of readiness to go in the boardroom, but let's also support them and let's understand the support they need, because when they go in those boardrooms at the moment, it will still feel tough at times. You need your network. We heard that. You need your mentors. You need your sponsors. I describe it as your support toolbox. You need different things in that support toolbox to help you on that journey. So this is why we're focusing on that. It doesn't mean that other roles and different levels aren't important. They are. But we know, we saw from Kuvi's triangle, there's a lot to do here. And this conversation is not saying that one program, one initiative is going to solve it. It won't. You know, there needs to be many. But I hope what you've heard today, I love the term that you used as well, Ananta, about intersectional challenges as well. Your race won't be the only thing. You know, when I became a director, I was the only Black director at the time, but I was also the youngest. You know, there were different reasons why. Yes, and I'm a female as well. And yes, I'm a mum as well. There'll be other things that, about you and your authentic self that may make it challenging for you alongside your race as well. So what you heard here was broadening your portfolio of experience, really understanding your personal development needs. And I think there are tools to help you do that. No one's saying that you have to crack that on your own. Thinking about changing to fit. Now, I know that's a controversial statement because we hear being your authentic self, but Taps, I did hear you say that about changing to fit with the culture, what you had to do that when you first came here. And I would ask people to challenge themselves and understand the line on that between, this isn't about not being your authentic self, it's understanding when you sometimes need to adapt because of the way we do things around here. That's different to losing yourself on that journey. And I'd be happy to have a broader conversation about that. It's not easy to work that out, you know, but what is the right conversation to drive action? And I heard Bal say, you know, get into the discomfort to spark action. And I think that's what a lot of people would be saying, I think in here is, this is about getting into the discomfort. So I hope what you've heard today is starting to hopefully open some of those conversations up. Ruby, can we put the slides up? And I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. So let me see if I can do it in 4 minutes, because I just want to try and wrap this up and then bring my panel guests back on to say thank you. So please stay on camera if you want to. It's absolutely fine. But I really want to land this takeaway action. You've heard a lot here. You've heard me say this isn't just about somebody else needing to do it. Yes, there are things that other people need to do, but you heard front and center about self-accountability. And I also know some of that will be about possibly supporting others. I'm not ignoring what I heard about how some people are feeling. You know, some people are feeling dejected. Some people have gone through terrible situations. I also respect that what we've covered today can bring up feelings, you know, that are difficult to manage. I'm not ignoring that. But I really want to ask you to take this action away. What step are you going to take to help turn the dial now? So there's been lots in the chat about what we need other people to do and what we need to see happening. And I'm not ignoring that, but I'm asking you this question. And I really want you to take this question away and capture. You don't have to answer it on the spot. If you think you know what it is, great. If you want to share it in the chat, great. But I'm asking you to commit here. Now, if we can click to the next slide. I hope I haven't forgotten my order. Okay. So a couple of things here. We're going to leave the call open for about 5 minutes after 4:30 because there's a lot in the chat. I'd encourage people, please share links of any documents you want to share, any best practice you're doing. Please share those in the chat. I hope Tia, if Tia's on the call for me, Tia's another one in my team. Tia will drop some things into the chat for me that I know is work that's going on by colleagues in the Midlands. I know we couldn't have anyone here from Sajida Ahmed's team. I would have loved for Sajida to share some of the work that she's doing. It's fantastic. Tap into that and have a look at it. It's the Staffordshire and Stoke work, and she's at Combined Healthcare Trust. I know Kuvi keeps a good handle on things that are going on as well. I heard the comment about accountability as well. How do we hold ourselves to account? How are organisations held to account? Again, some of you will know about the race code. I know that Carl George from the race code team was hoping to join the call today. Carl, I don't know if you're on the call, but if you are, please drop the link into the chat. I know that there are colleagues at Royal Wolverhampton. I know there's Ashley Williams at Black Country. They've done a lot of work to implement the race code and get the accreditation. Reach out to them and speak to them. The tool is there about how you can hold yourself to account and monitor this. So please use it, okay? But let me close up now and say, please do complete the feedback form for us. The link is in the chat. We will be sending an email out before the end of the week. With Diana, I've just seen your name pop up. Do share information about the programs and network that you've been involved with as well. I've seen you tweeting about them. There's some fantastic work going on there as well. Do pick up the feedback form in the chat. We will email it out to you as well. Do connect with us, connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. Connect with my Woodrow Mercer colleagues, Sam, Liam, Millie, they're on the chat today, Joe. Connect with us. You know, we talk about this, we'll be posting about this. And this is the first session in a series. We'll be running one across each of the 7 regions in the NHS. We're just working on the date for the London session, which I'm hoping will be the end of April. And so I just want to wrap up. I hope there isn't anything I've forgotten to say, except to thank everybody. And if I can click on one more time. And just to say thank you, a big thank you, massive thank you from me to our guest panel for your time, for your energy, for your commitment, for your honesty, and for accepting all my long-worded emails to try and get this right for today. But just thank you. I know you've inspired many, and I know that people want to connect with you as well. And I hope we can continue to work together and you can continue to help turn the dial now. So Ruby, if we could just say a big thank you to everybody. And thank you everybody for joining us on the call as well. I do hope that we'll be able to release an audio recording, but if we can't do that, we will definitely be sending out an insight slide deck just so that we can share with everyone who wasn't here today. Okay, so thank you everyone.
Thank you so much everyone.